Good evening. I'm Robert Sumwalt, and I'm a board member with NTSB. And let me tell you what we know so far. As you all know, we just started out, around 6:30 last evening, an 8-car Metro North train on the Harlem line struck a Mercedes SUV, which resulted in fire and explosion. You've read in the media where it was reported there's a Jeep Cherokee, it's a Mercedes SUV, is what it really is. Metro North is reporting 6 fatalities. The NTSB has identified a multidisciplinary team with experts from the NTSB's Office of Rail Safety, our Office of Highway Safety, as well as the NTSB's Office of Research and Engineering. The investigation is being led by Michael Hiller. Mike has over 25 years of rail experience, extensive rail background. As many of you know, the NTSB arrived on scene about 10 or 10:30 this morning. We had people filtering in all morning, began at about 9 o'clock this morning. I arrived on scene about 10:30. We have surveyed the scene and obtained detailed measurements and dimensions of the wreckage area. And we photo documented the wreckage area, and that includes ground photographs as well as aerial photographs. And for reasons that are not precisely known at this time, but reasons that we intend to find out, for whatever reason, the Mercedes SUV was stopped on the tracks. Tomorrow, we should be able to report the speed that the train was traveling when it struck the SUV. We've downloaded the recorders. I'll tell you about that in just a moment, but we want to verify that information before we release it. But I think we should be able to have that information verified tomorrow. So at the point of the collision, the SUV was pushed about 1,000 feet down the tracks. And during that time, the electrified rail, the third rail, as we call it, penetrated the chassis of the automobile behind the driver's seat, behind and below the driver's seat. It penetrated the chassis, came out sort of over the right rear tire, upward at an angle, and then into the first rail car. This rail, for about 400 feet of this electrified, of what is called the third rail, it started breaking apart in about 80-foot sections, and for about 400 feet of the third rail. In other words, about 400 feet of this third rail was shoved into and breaking apart into mostly the first rail car, but at least one piece penetrated over into the second rail car. The entire interior of the first rail car was burned out. And the initial indications, and this is an initial indication subject to more science, the initial indications are that the fire was fueled by gasoline from the SUV. Our survival factors group is evaluating the adequacy of the emergency exits, and we're also examining the strength, the crashworthiness strength of the rail cars. We have a group looking at signals. When I talk about signals, I'm talking about the rail signals themselves that would govern the speeds and the authority of the trains to travel along the track. And I'm talking about highway traffic signals that we're all familiar with. So we have somebody that's looking at the rail traffic signals, highway traffic signals, as well as the crossing gates at the rail crossing. And each of these devices that I just mentioned, each of them have recorders. And we've been able to download those recorders. And again, we've only been here for a few hours. We've gotten a lot done so far, but we have not really evaluated those data to check for validity. So that's something that we believe we should be able to provide you with tomorrow when we have a media briefing. We're investigating to determine if the design requirements for this type of grade crossing meet federal requirements. We would do that in any grade crossing accident to make sure that it does comply with federal requirements. We have an expert looking, our track specialists are evaluating to see if the alignment of the third rail was within required specs. We also want to know, was the electrical power to the third rail, was it interrupted when it started to break apart as it was designed to do? So of course, when the continuity of that third rail is interrupted, the power should automatically be removed, and that's something that we want to look at. Arrangements are being made to interview the train crew, the engineer, and the conductor, and we hope to get that done either tomorrow or the next day. As I mentioned earlier, this morning when I briefed, these folks have been through a very traumatic event. We want to make sure that they're in a position to be able to talk to us. And so that's why we don't just rush to do it today, but we believe we can get that done either tomorrow or the next day. The mechanical condition of the train, that's something that we would always look at in any train accident. So we want to make sure, just routinely, we want to make sure that the brakes were functioning properly and look for anything that may have precluded the timely stopping of the train. The event recorders. Each of the cars of the train has an event recorder. And so one of those event recorders has been shipped to our lab in Washington, D.C., and another one has been downloaded here on site. And we're pleased to say that the one that we downloaded on site had a successful download, and we plan to be able to release information to you tomorrow on that. Again, we want to look at the data, understand it, before we just give you unverified data. We also have been looking in the SUV to see if there may be any memory modules that may be useful. However, that vehicle was extensively fire damaged, and so honestly, I'm not horribly optimistic that we'll be able to recover anything from that from a memory perspective, but we are looking at that. We are conducting a complete and thorough investigation of elements that may have contributed to the intensity of the fire. The emergency response. We are interested in learning anything and everything that we can about the adequacy of the emergency response. That's something that we routinely do in any investigation. We will be looking at things like 911 records, the timeliness of the response, the number of responders. We're looking at those types of things. That's the rail components of this investigation. There's a highway component to it, and that is basically the big question everybody wants to know is, why was this vehicle in the crossing? And we want to understand, as many of you know, there was a traffic detour yesterday evening due to a prior traffic highway crash on the expressway. So we want to understand what, if any, effect that detour may have played in setting up this accident sequence. We're interested in talking to witnesses. As we know, in this day and age, everybody has cell phones and video and things like that. We're interested in any video footage that people may have. If anybody witnessed the accident or would like to provide us with information, we have set up an email address, and we would invite you and encourage you to email the NTSB at witness@ntsb.gov. Again, that's witness@ntsb.gov. We're optimistic that there will be video footage out there. We're also amazed that we get video footage from places that we didn't think we would get, security cameras and things like that. But we will ask the public for help in finding, helping us with video footage or with witnesses. Throughout the next several days, our investigators will continue to thoroughly document the scene, gather factual information. As I've said before, we are here to collect the perishable information, perishable evidence, the information that can go away with the passage of time. And that's what we're here to do, is to find that information. We're not here to speculate. We're not here to determine the cause of the accident while we are here. We're here just to collect the information, and then we go back and conduct a very thorough analysis of those facts. I suspect we will be here on scene for anywhere from 5 to 7 days. I want to thank and acknowledge the efforts of the local community for their cooperation and support. We want to thank the first responders for their efforts. We will be providing you information as we find it. We will plan to do a media briefing tomorrow, probably about the same time as this, because our investigators are out during the day doing the work, and then in the afternoon they can debrief me so I can debrief you, and that's usually why they're fairly late in the afternoon. You can find out when those media briefings will be by watching us at Twitter, following us at Twitter. Our handle is @NTSB, or you can look at our website for press releases at ntsb.gov. I'll be glad to take questions. What I'd like to ask, if you would kindly raise your hand when I call on you, please state your name and your affiliation. We have a lot of hands. Sir, Mr. Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Sumwalt. It's early, but is there any indication that the crossing signals or crossing arms were not working properly?
The question is there any indication the crossing arms or signals may not have been working properly? At this point, we have no indication to believe that they were doing anything other than operating properly. However, our investigation is just beginning, and we are looking at that information very carefully. So there's a question here.
Paul Beeben from Al Jazeera. This is not the first time that Metro North has come under this kind of scrutiny. They've been under tight scrutiny for a series of crashes. Is enough being done, generally speaking, to make this railroad safer?
The question is concerning the prior accident history of Metro North, and is enough being done to ensure safety? And I want to point out that, yes, the NTSB did release a report on the third week in November, a special investigation report about the organizational issues with Metro North. I believe those issues at the time that report was issued was valid, but I also want to caution that there may be no relationship between those issues that we found in that special investigation report and this accident. So I think that's the salient point there, is that here it appears that a vehicle was on the track and train ran into the track. So I would be very cautious in trying to draw a nexus between what's happened with Metro North in the past and what may have happened yesterday. Come here.
Jessica Schneider, WCBS TV. You mentioned looking for witnesses, finding any video they might have. You seem to mention maybe surveillance video somewhere around. Have you seen any video that would give you any better indication as to what happened?
Have we seen any video that might give us a good indication of what happened? And at this point, I'm not aware of any video, surveillance video that may have come forward. However, again, this accident was less than 24 hours ago. It was about 23 hours ago. And oftentimes we do find within the days following the accident that there are surveillance videos that we didn't even know about. So we are looking for that, and that's why we've asked for the help of the public to identify such topics. Alan Levin.
Mr. Sumwalt, could you go again through the scenario of where the third rail went through? So I'm clear on that, please.
So the third rail, of course, the railroad tracks, and tomorrow we're going to try and have a map for you to show you all of this. But the question is, can I describe better about the scenario of the third rail penetrating the rail cars? The third rail, we've got a north-south running track. The Harlem line, of course, the train was running north. To the west of the railroad track is the third rail. It appears that at the time that if this would be the railroad track and this would be the vehicle, it appears that this third rail lodged into the back left of the car at an angle, came out of the car at the right side, above the wheel, above the back right, rear right tire. So it's at an angle, coming from this high off the ground to this high off the ground. It's at an angle, and it continues that trajectory, and actually strikes just in front of the first set of train wheels. So there's a lot of mass with those wheels, which further leverages this in an upward direction. So as the train is moving down the track, this third rail is just basically lodging into, in 80-foot sections, lodging into and breaking apart section by section, 80-foot sections, section by section, just basically piling up inside that first train car. And finally, at least one of those third rail segments penetrated through into the second car at a very high, almost at the ceiling level. So Alan, I hope that clarifies it, and if not, we can have some follow-up questions. There's a question here.
Hello, Ida Siegel from WNBC. In light of what you just said, we've had a number of other commuter rail accidents involving a train hitting a car, and to my knowledge, no other train passengers have died in those accidents. Would you then characterize this accident as particularly dangerous, troubling? How would you characterize this accident in light of that fact?
We do have grade crossing accidents. Oftentimes most of the time, it's fatal for the occupants of the vehicle, the car, the truck, but not for the train passengers. And that is a true statement. Usually it does not cause, we have seen Merriam, Nevada just a few years ago, was an Amtrak train where a truck ran into the side of an Amtrak train. But you're right, usually it is not endangering the occupants of the train. We intend to find out what makes this accident different. What was it that made this different that caused this to be fatal to 5 people on board that train? That's really going to be the heart of it, is the survival factors issues. 2 big questions: why was the car on the train tracks, and what caused this accident to be fatal for occupants of the train? There's a question here.
Sir, thank you. Josh Onier, WABC TV. After the Spite and Dival derailment, it became clear through your reporting that the MTA, Metro North, had not invested in a whole slew of technology that could have prevented that crash. Positive control, the dead man switch, what have you. Does there exist in the world technology that could allow the engineer of a train to know there is an obstacle in his path before he sees it and before it's too late to stop? And if so, should the MTA, should Metro North already have it in place?
The question is there technology available that would allow an engineer of a train to be able to see an obstacle on the track before it might become even visible to the naked eye? And honestly, Mike, yes or no?
Not proven technology.
So, I mean, I've been studying rail accidents for for 8.5 years, and I'm not familiar with that technology. Mike's been in the business for 25 years plus. This is the first I've heard of that. You know, we have been a long advocate of positive train control, which we believe will prevent a lot of accidents. This type of an accident, I don't believe there's technology that's
So
out there.
just to follow up, I mean, is there basically no way to stop a grade crossing accident like this if the engineer doesn't see the car in time?
So can you stop a grade crossing accident? We certainly believe that grade crossing accidents can be prevented, and that's why we're here. Our entire purpose for being here. We're not in the business of pointing fingers, laying blame, assigning fault. We're here for one reason, and that is to find out what happened so that we can keep these things from happening again. So yes, grade crossing accidents can be prevented. We've issued recommendations in that area, a number of recommendations over the last few years. So yes, they can be prevented. This one we want to find out, just as I mentioned earlier, what made this one different than others? So I'll take one last question, and we'll go, let's see where we'll go. We'll go right over here in the red.
Hi, Candace Reed with Newsday. I was wondering if you had at this point a play-by-play of what happened when the driver entered the crossing gate, the rail crossing, why she wasn't able to either back out or drive forward, just kind of exactly what happened.
And can you say whether she was in the car or not?
Okay, do we have a play-by-play of if the driver got out of the car? We've heard reports of perhaps she had gotten out of the car and things like that. Do we know if she was in the car at the time of the collision? And what we intend to do is to put together that very play-by-play. We want to put together a timeline to understand, and I think that we can do that with a number of things. The event recorders will help us, any video evidence we may have. I understand that there's a gentleman who was directly behind the SUV when the accident occurred. So we believe, I'm confident that we will be able to put together a good timeline of this event. One of the things we'll be doing too is a sight distance test to see that if you were stopped on the tracks, at what point could you be able to see a train, and the opposite of that, at what point could the engineer of the train be able to see a stopped vehicle. I want to thank you for your attention. We will be providing you information as we learn it.